So today I'm going to be talking about the creation of a brand. I'll start with a little introduction of myself in several different brands that I have. My name's Christy Harner. As a person, I am a UX designer and a filmmaker. I've been doing that for about 10 years. So I love making stories, film, designing things, and my real big passion is to take somebody's story or somebody's idea and turn it into a real product or a brand or a business. And so that is really my passion in life. I also have another alter ego, Christy Harner. I'm an author and I write young adult novels. So that's another one of my brands. As a young adult author, I help teenagers with creative writing, and I've written several books about fairies and the environment and things like that. And I don't normally mix those brands together, but that was just an example of another brand that I have. My third brand is that I'm a Chinese language student, and that's something that I do on the side as a passion. And where that comes into play in my business is that I work with a lot of development teams, and some of them are in China. And so I'm really trying to understand other cultures and other languages. And also when the US isn't as important anymore and the world's turned upside down, I'd really like to learn some of the major languages. So that was another goal of mine. My fourth brand is Mommy. I'm a single mom, and I was at 3 soccer games today, so if I seem a little messy, I was on the ground screaming at a 5-year-old to remember to look at the ball instead of at the flowers off to the side. And I also took him out to the woods to pee once. So this might be my real brand, but this is the one that I do normally. I am the boss. I am a co-founder of Binary Ventures, which is actually a company in Charlotte. We've about 2 years old. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as I go along, because that's really where my speech today comes to play. So I'm the creative principal, and so nobody calls me the boss, and my UX designers here didn't even want to come to my speech, so who knows how important I really am, but that's another one of my brands. Just a really, really quick background that relates to the creation of a brand. When I was in school, I actually didn't study design, I actually studied cultural studies. I absolutely love how people think, languages, worldviews, religions. It's all fascinating to me. And so I've traveled all over the world. I would say I've been to 25 countries, but I think it might be 26 now with Scotland. I'm not sure what it is. My sister and I have a debate, and so as of this week, I think I've beat her because we were both at 25, and she's never been to Scotland. So I think I'm at 26 now. Some of the places that I've been the most are things like West Africa. I studied in West Africa for a summer. I've been to Europe many times. My sister on the top right is getting married. She lives in India now. I have a little half Indian niece, so I'm really excited. China, and my parents live in Pakistan. So my cultural experience started in college, but has gone throughout my life, and now I actually run development teams all over the world, which is super fun, and it's awesome because a lot of my teams, when you talk to somebody in India or Pakistan, usually you as the project manager doesn't know them, but I can actually say, oh, I've been to your town, and it's really fun. So I'm very thankful for my background in that culture. So right now I work at Binary Ventures, and I started that company 2 years ago with my business partner, Steve Nolan, who is the managing principal. So he told me when we started that he would take care of all the things that I hate. So he manages things and does the payroll and the sales and all of that. And my job is to work with companies and help them with their brands. And so what we do is we work with startups. About 70% of our customers are startups. And so what we do is we help these people who have this really cool idea, whether it's a mobile app or an online store, or maybe it's a web application that doesn't relate to mobile. They have an idea, and they're very, very excited about it, and they're very passionate about these ideas, but they haven't built anything yet. And so what we get to do is come in and listen to that idea, and it's really, really fun because instead of just working with an existing company or an existing brand, I get to actually hear them pitch this brand from the very beginning. They've got nothing. Sometimes, most of the time, they don't even have a name. And so I get to hear them pitch their idea, and then I get to start with them and build this brand for them, and it's so exciting. And I say for them, and I really should say with them, because my job isn't just to take their idea and build what I think is a brand, but I need to take their idea and make it them in the best way, and that will get results, as Nora talked about before me. I know she talked about getting the results, and not just listening to just the customer, but making sure they're going to get results. And I have to go back to the very beginning, and I have to actually find out who this person is. And I have to help from the very, very beginning, finding out who they are and how we're going to build this brand. So before I really get started, I wanted to show you a comic that is about 8 or 9 years old, but it perfectly represents the bad parts of starting to create a brand. How many of you have seen the How Web Design Goes Straight to Hell comic? Okay. I know a lot of people have seen it. It's been around for a while, and especially when I was starting out, this kind of thing happened to me all the time. But it's a really, really amazing representation of how a brand can go. And so if you just take web design and change it to brand or change it to anything with the design, it's all the same. So I'm just going to go over it really quick because it really relates to what we're doing. First of all, everything's cool in the beginning. The client communicates their needs. You set expectations. Everyone's like super happy. They think you're awesome. They haven't seen anything yet, but they think you're great. You're a good salesperson. Then they show the current website, and you're like, oh my God, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. Everybody's laughing, like this crime is a site to humanity. A site is a crime to humanity. It's horrible. Our last designer was an idiot. Note to self: whenever they say that, they're gonna say that about you in 5 years. So just be really careful what you say. We're all idiots 5 years, like looking back, right? So, anyways, we're all laughing. Oh my God, Comic Sans. And then you redesign the website, or you rebuild the brand, or you redesign the logo, whatever it is. It looks awesome, because you're designing it, so it looks really amazing. And so that's where the best part of the whole brand comes into play. Ta-da, you've got this awesome brand. So then they come in and they say, oh, just a few minor changes, because what's happened is you didn't let them design it. So you designed it, and now they feel like they need to design it. So they're like, I feel obligated to make changes, and so they start adding, make it pop, more edgy, doesn't feel right. And so this comes these weird feelings, and they start suggesting, I want the color blue here and brown here, and it's just, you start making the changes for them. So then we go switch back to the, Comic Sans, and then make it less liney. I love when he writes on here that this has happened to me. I've had the weirdest suggestions, and they've all happened to everybody. And then it gets really bad because, he gets other people involved, coworkers, pet hamster, uncle. I've looped my mother into this conversation. She designed a bake sale flyer back in '82. So you could say she has an eye for design. That has so happened to me. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, the design you put together needs some colors, perhaps a little pink. Throw in a kitten. Everyone loves kittens. I actually did just throw a kitten in this presentation, I realized. So anyways, throw a kitten in it. Yeah, that's great. So then all hope is lost. Seriously, you begin to fantasize about other careers. You've got Miffles, the stream of consciousness dog that's going to end up on this presentation. Just gets really, really bad. You are no longer a web designer. Now you're a mouse cursor inside a graphics program, which the client can control by speaking, emailing, and instant messaging. It's so bad. Finally, at the end, an abomination's born, and you really do think, I think this looks like it originally did, and you really just want to quit your job and go somewhere else. And they're happy, which is the scary part, because they don't know. And so you've failed at your job. They may think that you've won or you've done a good job, and it's just everybody's sad. So that is the intro to my presentation, because this really, really represents how things can go south quickly. So because of that, my motto is, or one of my mottos is, the brand starts with the founder or the client or whoever it is. That is where the brand starts. It is in their head, especially for a new client and a new product, whether it's a new product for a company or a new product, especially if you have more of an open table, the brand starts with the founder. Scary thing is that the founder can be anybody. So I get people doing all sorts of things. I've got clients who, an older lady, 75 years old, came to me and wants to start a new clothing line, and she's, in her 70s. That's one of my challenges. I've got to work with her. I've got, a 50-year-old guy that wants to do a Christian online store, which is, there's so much competition, and I've got to work with it. I've got all different people, young, old, everybody. And you've got to work with the person that you've got, and you can't make them somebody they're not. So the first thing you need to do is make no assumptions when that person comes in, whether it's by looks or the crazy idea they have. Don't make any assumptions. And so what I want to do is I want to give you some tips for how to make that brand session go really well. And what I do when I first start a brand is, and I'll give you an example. The other day, I had someone call me on the phone. So first of all, I know no idea who this person is. I don't know how old they are. I know it's a guy. I don't know what race they are. I know nothing. So he calls me up and he says, this is the guy that says, I want to start an online Christian accessories and gift store. And I'm thinking like, okay, we're gonna make it like really hipster, and it's gonna be reaching toward young adults, and okay, I can do this, because I kind of grew up real fundamental, so I totally went to these Christian bookstores, but I don't wanna make it like that. I wanna make it really cool, and I have this whole idea in my mind. And then I have to remember, I don't know who he is. I don't know if he's my age. I don't know if he's 50. I don't know who he is. And so I have to start by, when I go and meet with him, I have to really start from ground zero. And oh yeah, here's the cat I threw in. So when you start talking to your clients, you need to remember that you're basically asking them all about themselves. And so what I'm gonna do is give you a bunch of questions that we can ask. And this presentation is really going to be questions that I ask. And when I do meet with that client, for example, when I talked to him on the phone, I said, let's meet in person. And he had agreed that he wanted to have us build a website, do his brand, and do his initial marketing. We don't do ongoing marketing, but we build the brand and then give you the tools and hook you up with a marketing team. And so I came with an 80-slide questionnaire where we're just gonna sit down and ask questions, and I made no assumptions whatsoever, and that made it so that I could create a brand for him that he felt really good about. So when you go and sit down with this cat meme, you think, this guy is somebody that's just coming to me and he's gonna tell me his whole life story. You gotta be really interested in him and really get to learn about him. So the very first question I ask is, why are you creating this brand? What is it that you're doing? And this is such a good question for anybody to ask, especially a startup, because they may not have a really good reason for creating the brand. There may be a nugget in there somewhere, but something like, I want to make a bunch of money isn't really a good reason. And although it's not my job to tell them not to build a business, it's my job to take that idea that they have and that reason and turn it into a really good reason and a really good window, a really good product that will actually have a chance in the market. So I need to know why he's doing it, because I don't want to veer off too far from the brand that he's done. And I'm going to try to focus more on the design side of things. So the first example is this Christian accessories and gift store. He wanted to call it godlygiftshomedecorandmore.com, and I said that no one would ever remember that name. So we do have that URL, and you'll be able to check it out, but Love the Lord Inc. is what we went with, because we are going to be building some products for, and I wanted t-shirts to look really nice, and the other name was kind of long. So when I started and he told me he wanted to build this, I had this idea in my head that he was maybe like 80 years old and he wanted to do like a Joel Osteen kind of bookstore, and that was just a bad assumption. So I had to really sit down and say, okay, what do you actually want to do? And when I met him, I found out he pretty much looked like this guy in the early 50s, although he looks a lot younger. He came from corporate America. He had been recently married, was a very strong Christian, and this was a dream that he'd always had. And I had none of those assumptions in my head when I first started. So I was really excited to meet him, because then I thought, okay, awesome, I've got a blank slate. I have no idea what this guy wants, but he seems really cool, so that's good. Started with my are you okay with hipster question, because that always helps me with design. But anyways, it was really awesome to meet with him and just say, oh, okay, this is who you are. Now let me ask you more questions about yourself. So I found out, how old he is. I know that's crazy, but it helps with kind of figuring out his pop culture references, his style and taste, and then where he came from, and even his relationship. I know that's crazy, but those are all things that really help me when I'm building a brand. The other thing that I found out during this, which is the answer to the why question, is this verse. And yes, he wanted this entire verse on the homepage of the Coming Soon website. So I made it so that I really needed to make sure that when I built this brand, that this verse was prominent, or at least was represented in design. And so we've been able to cut down the verse a little so that it's not the entire love the Lord with all your heart commandment, but the entire design of the website is going to be represented in this verse, or this verse will be represented in the design, kind of both ways. But basically, he really wants to make sure that every part of this website is a reflection of the fact that people who have the faith that he has will want to live God in every part of their lives, whether it's at home, whether it's at school, whether it's at work. And so what we decided to do was really take all these pictures and accessories and gifts that he's going to be building. And in the final site, this is just the Coming Home site, and you can see we saw the full verse down there. But this is the coming soon site. And in the final site, what we're gonna do is the home page is gonna have these giant pictures, real beautiful pictures of a living room and a kid's room and a classroom. And throughout the page, you'll see all the different gift items and accessories and things that will really represent God in that room. So that was his passion. And so what we wanna do is make sure that the design, that his passion comes out in that design. And so that was an example of a why. Why are you doing this? And there are so many different reasons why. And that was just one example that I really liked because it was a challenge. Taking that, he said, this is why, and here's my verse. Now make it into the design. So now it can represent inside of the name and inside of the homepage and inside of all of the photography that we do. Another question that's very important is, what is your background? This really mostly comes into play when you're starting a new company, but it's very, very important. So one of the examples that I want to share is Paradine. And Paradine is a new mobile app. And what Paradine is it's an app for businesses. And so let me tell you a little about Jake. Jake is the owner of Paradine. And he started this business. He was working for Goldman Sachs, and he was a sales guy, so he was traveling all over the world selling, and so he was always going to these new cities, and he would show up in Seattle and he wouldn't really know what to eat or where to go, and then if he had a client that he needed to meet with, he wouldn't know where to take them for dinner. And so yes, there's Yelp and there are other things like that, but what he found was that there was no app that really said, okay, I'm going to pick out the best places. And so if he goes to Seattle, he can actually click on the different filters for a restaurant, say, that he took his client to. And then the next time somebody else from his business goes who is linked to him through LinkedIn, they will go and they'll see that there's a really good restaurant for taking a client to, or for having an evening with somebody, or going to a coffee shop. And so his entire goal and his entire reason for building this app was to solve a problem. And that was because his background was in sales. And so I was very excited when we got to start working with him, because he actually was solving a problem. And the problem was that, this 97% would rather get a recommendation from a friend or a colleague rather than going to Yelp. And so when you're solving a problem and your background is in something, whether he had a background in technology or background in sales, I love that he had a background in sales because he was passionate about solving that problem for salespeople. And so the reason that plays into the design is that because he knew that Paradine was a solution for salespeople, and there are hundreds of thousands of salespeople that travel all the time, all of our designing and all of our branding was directed straight toward the salespeople. It wasn't directed toward everybody. It was directed toward people just like Jake. And so as we went through our Twitter and our social media and our videos, and even banners for TechCrunch and things like that, we designed everything with the business guy in mind, or the business girl in mind. We wanted to make sure that we represented Jake, and that Jake's background and passion and need for an app that helped him as he was going through his day would be represented in the design. But I wouldn't necessarily have known that, because if I hadn't really asked Jake why he was doing this and what his background was in. Because honestly, Paradine could be an app for people, just anybody who wants to learn about new restaurants and wants to hook up with their friends and find out where friends like to eat. That's also a solution, but Jake really wanted to make it a solution for salespeople. And so our first round and our first year campaign of design for Paradine was specifically for those people like Jake. A third question that is very helpful to ask, and is honestly, as you all probably know, one of the most important, is, what is your story? Now, you could say that it's part of that is their personal story. Like, for example, Jake's story. Pretty much anybody that I'm working with, their personal story is very, very good for actually giving the brand some personality, right? So the story can come out in design through a video that shows how this app works, or it can come out as simple as a logo where you've got the little tassel to show that it's for schools, because school is spelled wrong, so you have to give a hint to that one. And then there's things like a video where it just explains information. But when I talk to a client, sometimes they don't really know that their story is really important. And so I want to tell them even more things. So I'll honestly spend a little more time explaining to them that their story is really important. And I want to know everything about their story because there might be something in there that's a really interesting item to focus on. So I give them this list of things. These are some of the reasons why I need to know your story. Improves the brand image and industry authority, and then it expands added value for websites and increases time on the site, increases the social share and cross promotion, increases visits and leads, widens the competition gap, and decreases cost and intrusiveness of advertising. And where this plays into the actual design can be very different, whether it's video or a website or an illustration. And one example that I have was a company called Derwent. Now, the name Derwent will probably be changed with the website's launch, but we're still working with this company. And when he came to me, this guy, Tim, he's the owner of Derwent, he actually wants to start this company where they address the technology readiness levels, and I'm probably not going to explain this quite right because it was a little confusing to me too, but basically there's this arc of innovation, and when somebody has an idea that's something maybe that the construction industry can use, they have to go through various levels. And so he sent me this dial, and he's like, I drew up a dial for you, you can use it on the website. So I'm like, okay. So yeah, so we did kind of, and but I did love this, and this was very important to him. And he said people don't know all of the different readiness levels, but after I talked to him for a while, he didn't really want much on his website. He really just wanted to explain what the technology readiness levels were, and then where they fit into it. And so that he could then talk to them in person and say, we fit between 7 and 9, and that's where they fit in, where they're going through the actual commercial application and real world trials. So he's the trial guy. So I had to learn his story, and that's a different kind of story where it's an actual, just kind of showing how it works. So when we actually did the website, it's a little different than a site that I would normally do because I did it in illustration because I didn't have any real case studies because he was brand new. So what I did was I just did illustrations for it, and we started by talking about bridging the gap from innovation to application. And if you want, you can just click on one of the circles, like I am an investor, I am an industry, I am an innovator, and you can go and learn just a little bit about what those 3 different people do in this industry, and then you're supposed to call him, or you can actually read down this list and learn about it. And so on the website, and I was going to do like a video of it, but I was scared that it might not work here. So what I did was I was just going to show you some examples. You scroll down and you see the list of exploratory research, concept development, proof of concept, laboratory testing, laboratory validation, and they just kind of animate in, and then you see where we can help, which is 6, 7, and 8. And then why is this important? And you go down and you learn that as you scroll down, these things animate in, and you learn that the US is actually not doing as many patents as China. And so we're trying to really increase our patents and increase our innovation and inventions, especially in this industry. So that was very important to him. So I included that as a design. And then we went down through the 10. And so as you scroll down, you can see number 1 is the basic idea. Innovation starts with an idea, and then it goes to concept development. And you can see what, just really little bits about it, because I didn't want to overwhelm anyone with the design, but there's just that story, the proof of concept, the laboratory testing, the laboratory validation, and then how can level 7 help, which was the other name we were going to do for our company. So this was kind of like a test on the names. I don't think we're going to do either of them. We have like some Greek god now that's about technology, which was a lot cooler name. And then the initial commercial application defined. And then you just keep scrolling down basically, and you see that this is another example of how to take someone's story and turn it into design. But it really requires sitting down with them and asking all these questions, what is your story and why are you doing it? So that's part of my initial brand with somebody, is just finding out that story so that I can figure out how we're going to represent it in a design. The next thing I address is, what is your style? So this can be a little more elusive and difficult for people because, I kind of know my style. You saw my different people, things that I am. I'll wear like a Mulan t-shirt, and then I'll wear, nice clothes, and I'll wear mommy clothes, and those are different styles, and a lot of people don't really know what their style is. So what I end up doing with this one is I start showing them different styles. Like, for example, this is funny and witty. And the reason that you want to ask them about their style is actually very important, because when you start designing their logo and their website and their videos, you don't want to go off and do something that looks kind of like Instagram and is really cool and I don't know, young, fresh. If they really want something that's very, for example, like Paradine, which is very businessy and elegant. And so I have to ask these styles and I show them different designs. And I really recommend doing this with a client when you're working through a brand, is just showing them different types of design and different types of styles. So I say, this one's really funny because it says the journey of 1,000 miles sometimes ends very, very badly. And they love it. If they love it, you kind of write it down like, oop, they really liked the funny stuff. And you go through it, and then this is youthful, and do you like bright colors, and are you trying to reach out toward teens? And we will talk about target audience, but as far as the style itself goes, you kind of need to help them along with this one and just show them different ideas of things that maybe they would really like to do. Hipster, I know I keep saying hipster because I'm like a wannabe hipster. I'll never be hipster, but like, are you hipster? Do you like this kind of stuff? Do you like the minimalistic, whatever it is? And then there's something like clean and personal. And that's again on the story side. Are we really focusing on the photography, and what are we focusing on? And then you can start giving a list, because it's kind of just to get an idea of things that they say. I absolutely don't want to be silly or friendly, I don't know. But you just go through and figure out what it is that they really like and what's their style. And so this is an example that that was kind of a fun one for me, which is Spend Boss. And Spend Boss was a company that I've been working with for a couple years. I was actually one of the founders of it. I wasn't I was one of the founders of it, and it's a software for retail industry. So basically, high-end retail, like Coach, Joanne Fabrics, big companies like that, they will use a software at the highest level to be in charge of all of the different stores throughout that company, and tell each store how much money they're allowed to spend every month on everything. So they can spend X amount on buying new refrigerators, might be once a year. They're allowed to spend X amount on toilet paper, and it's basically anything that's not retail. So anything in their store, the carpeting, the lighting, the electronics, anything, they have to regulate through this software. And so we built the software and we actually helped name it Spend Boss, because they wanted it to be kind of cool and kind of about the fact that you are in charge and you are the boss now, and this helps you take over. So when I was talking to the guy who was their marketing person, and as we were kind of starting this team, but they had some ideas and I had some ideas, I was letting him come up with the ideas, because he was the one that, after I exited the company, he was going to be really running the marketing department. So I wanted to make sure that anything we designed for our overall concept would be something that he really owned as a person. And so he came to me, and he's a super awesome person. He's like 55, he's crazy. I think he's ADD, he's probably like 10 inside and he's 55, because he's just awesome. And so he's like, I have this idea, we're gonna be Mad Men, because it's like the boss. And so I'm like, okay, like I love Mad Men, that's fun, let's do it. So he's like, we're gonna be Mad Men, and we're gonna be bossy and snarky and professional and clever. And so I'm thinking like, awesome, we'll do like cigar smoking and whiskey and all this stuff. And so we even went as far as doing like photo shoots, and it got a little out of hand in some ways, because started realizing, first of all, it was a little chauvinistic, and there were no females. I was like the only female in the company. It's like, okay, so you need to wear a bright red dress, Christy, and like be standing there. And I'm like, is this kind of like sexual harassment? And I'm doing it to myself. I'm not sure what's going on. So I'm cool with it, but then we started really thinking about it, because you have to have that first crazy idea, right? So kind of had to rein it in. But that allowed him to have the idea, and then it was my job to make it actually marketable, because I didn't want to get in trouble. And so my job is to make sure that that guy owns the brand, owns the idea, but I'm actually managing the brand and making sure that we stay on track. So we kind of pulled back a little and went very classy and elegant, but still with the boss name. And I think the tagline is "Get Bossy and Take Control of Your Spend." So I did a couple of things. We started with the logo and just kind of picked some real classy, clean colors, made it real simple, and then started with this whole suit thing. So everything's got the suit on it. And that worked a lot better, because there wasn't the whole cigar whiskey thing anymore. It was really just about like, I'm the boss, real classy, clean. And everybody loved the business cards, because every single person on the this C-level execs had like a different suit. So like I got a little necklace instead, and somebody else got a little girl scarf thing, and then they had pockets, and everything was very unique. So this was a way to represent that Mad Men idea without going too far into it, and representing a brand that could transcend some time. It wouldn't just be, while AMC was still running Mad Men. And then we also brought in girls. So, we have a little bit more. The girl was actually doing boxing gloves, and she's the boss. So that was a way to balance the cool idea of using Mad Men and bring in the less chauvinistic, more modern times design. So as an example of knowing your style, and this was very much a style piece where everything was style. And in fact, the CEO, even today, when he goes and does a sales pitch, so if he travels to another state, he will actually wear his black suit and his little, whatever that thing is in his pocket, and he looks just like the guy in the business card. So then he gets to hand out his business cards, and it's very styled. So that was a really fun brand to create. And so that's an example of going a little too far, but letting them come up with the idea and the style. That was their style, and then I kind of made it more mainstream. Another thing that you only really have to deal with when you're a new company, but it's really fun and a little nerve-wracking to do, is come up with a name. And so everybody has a name when they start. One of our companies, I'll talk about a little bit later, was called Mobile Money, and it was about local merchants, and so we really didn't like the name Mobile Money, so we changed it to Localtopia, and that's an example of changing a name, and it's very important to do at the very beginning. If you have something where you feel the name is a good example. FitRaise is one of ours. When they came to us, they were Social Size, and I'm not even sure if I spelled it right, to be honest, just now, even though they're one of my clients. And the .com was available, so it was really awesome for them. But I met them, and they said, "Oh, our name's Social Size," and they really didn't have a game plan exactly, but they had built an app, and I couldn't find a screenshot of it because they took the website down, and I forgot to screenshot the original app. But basically, this is a mobile app for people who want to. Have you ever heard of charity miles, where you can run and every mile you go, you're donating? Well, what they wanted to do was one step further, where instead of just a company that had already basically allotted money to people who wanted to run for charity miles, and then you would basically be giving that money that they had already allotted, it was you actually going out and finding sponsors from around your friends online, Facebook, social media, and then every time you ran, they would sponsor you, and then it would show up on your Facebook and show how many miles you'd run or how much you'd biked. So the name Social Size was nice because it was social and exercise, but it just didn't work because no one remembered how to spell it and what the name was. So we had to change the name. And so when we were working on the design itself and really asking them what's the point, what's the purpose, they said, we really want people to get fit, we want people to be healthy, and we want to raise money. So to be honest, they came up with the name FitRaise after we helped them come up with the idea and the brand and the words fit and raise. And so they came up with this. And the exciting part about that is that we were able to guide them toward that name, but they came up with it. So they felt very much like it'd been a team effort, and they had that idea themselves. And that's the best. That's a win because we helped them get there, but they really owned the brand. So our job was really just to design it, and to guide them toward getting the right name and the right look and the right feel for their company. We rename probably half the companies that come to us because it's very, very important as part of your brand to come up with the right name, and then your logo is going to be easier to figure out, and your design and all of that. So asking them about their name is part of branding something, and don't be afraid to ask them, because to be honest, I've talked to companies who, if they're maybe 6 months old or a year old and they have some customers or they're in beta, and you say, do you like your name? Do you think you need some help with your name? They're very willing to look at it because they want results. They want to get more customers, and if they haven't had customers, then changing the name is not always a bad idea. So that's something that I ask at a first meeting, is just throwing it out there. Do you like your name? And if they like it, and that's, godly gifts decor, home decor, and more, sometimes you fight it a little more because you want to make sure that they make money and they get results that they want. So it's an important thing to do. Who do you listen to? This is basically, who are the people that are going to be influencing this brand? Now, it can widely vary from the uncle and pet hamster that we mentioned on the comic to, a spouse, because that one is actually more common than you think. One example I have, and I don't have any like visuals for this, but I had a customer who I started working with the branded design, and I showed him, I went through, do you like this kind of design or this? Do you like these kind of illustrations, this? What colors do you want? I went through this whole exercise, and then he got back and showed his girlfriend what he decided, and she was like, oh, hell no. And then she started Skyping me and saying, I think I want to do this and I want to do that. And it's like, oh my God, we were halfway through designing. And so what you have to do, and what I do now up front is, are you married? So I'll always ask, like, what's your wife like? Is she gonna be part of this? And if they say, oh, like she wants nothing to do with it, you're like, okay, are you sure? Or, if she's super excited about this brand. If she says that, anytime you send them a design, just ask them to run it by the person, because it's gonna really matter in the end, and even include them. If there's other people, and wife is just one example, but if there are other people that are like, another boss or a partner or something like that, make sure they're there when you're making decisions about that brand, because otherwise they're not going to listen. And also remind them that you're the expert in this, and so you need to have everybody that's going to be part of that brand to make decisions, but also be able to establish with all of those people that this guy or this girl hired you to design this brand. And so they need to be part of that as well. Another thing that you need to talk about is, what are your unique factors? And so one example of this would be a company that's called Bands for Good. And Bands for Good was a unique factor because what they did was they had an online music. It was like American Idol on the internet, and that's a little more common now. This was several years ago, and they came up with this idea. It's crazy how things change. And so we had this idea where they had the idea, and we were supposed to design this for them. So we designed their logo and their website. And the goal was that every time that a new musician came on, there'd be a contest every 6 months or so, and there would be about 30 to 50 musicians, and they would all perform songs online. And then you could vote once every day, and if you voted more than once, you would buy votes. And so you would actually be buying votes, and the votes, though, I know that sounds kind of weird, but the votes would actually go toward a charity. And so because that was their unique factor, no one was doing that, where you could donate to a charity in order to help your artist get more votes for the contest. And so we really focused on that. Every design that we did, everything that we did, we focused on the charity and the fact that, hey, you can add more votes, and this is really about about veterans. The first one was veterans, so we really focused on that in our branding and our designing. Was that you were doing good, and the Doing Good Network was what they were, kind of their overarching company, and so we focused on that, do good, and that this is for charities. So it's important to find that unique factor, and everybody has a very different one. So as important as that goes, there's also the fact that the brand continues with the audience, and we all know that because, as you know, the founder, the client is important, and their style and their taste and their desire and their naming and their passions are very important, but it actually continues with the audience. So I know you know all this about target audiences and ROI and the people that you're reaching out to, so I'm not really going to go into that. What I'm going to go into is more talking about how you would talk to your client about this. And so when I go through all these things with the style and the ideas and the passions, I have to tell them as well, especially with a new person, but remind them, even if they've been around doing branding for a while or new products for a while, is that you need to remember who your audience is, because this plays into the design as well. And as I mentioned Localtopia before, Localtopia is kind of like Groupon, but or an entertainment book. Basically what it is that any local merchants in a city that are on Localtopia, they will give maybe $2 or $5 a month to anybody who's subscribed to this Localtopia app. So I will have a Localtopia app for $5, and I will pay $5 a month, and then 100 local merchants will give me discounts, not buy one get one, but like an actual genuine discount every month. And so it's not a unique, but it is a unique thing because it focuses on local merchants. And so the real question was, when we started this brand and we started our marketing, were we reaching out to the end consumer or the merchants? And the real answer was, this first launch is really all about the merchant, because the merchant is the one that's going to actually make the brand happen, because they need to be on this platform in order to get consumers. So who is that merchant? And we began to talk about who the merchant, how is this going to be played into the design of the website and the brochures and the print materials. And so everything we designed and everything that we built was around that merchant. And even the actual app itself, we wanted it to be very pleasant for merchants. So they felt like Great, I want to get my name on this platform because I think this is a quality platform that encourages local use, and that's why we had to change that name from Mobile Money to Localtopia, and we said it's all about local. And so that's very important, is just figuring out who your audience is so that when you design, you're designing with those people in mind. And we're almost done, I promise. So one of the last things is, who's the competition? People often, when they're starting a new product, are like, oh, I'm a lone wolf. I am the only person doing this app in the entire world. And so one of the things you have to remind them when you're working on that initial branding and design is you say, no, you're not. These are all the people that I looked up on Google in like the first 2 seconds that are doing exactly what you're doing. And then here are like 13 award-winning e-commerce websites that are doing exactly what you're doing. And then I go through and explain, these people are doing it, and these people are doing it, and these people are doing it, these people are doing it, Amazon's doing it, you're screwed. And so they say, and you know, it's kind of funny because I'm almost at the end of my presentation and I never really had like a good answer exactly, but how can I compete? And the answer is, and so when I do talk about the audience and like this is who you're gonna be competing against, the answer really, really is all the things we just went through. If you know who you are, and you know what your name is, and you know your message, and you've got that design down, you know what your story is, and what you're trying to do, and why you're doing this, and then you have us help you create that brand directly around that, that idea, and that passion, and that love, and we've figured out your style, then you're actually going to do a good job, and you're going to be able to compete, because I've been able to listen to you tell me all about yourself and all about your brand and what you want. And now I'm going to be able to, if I'm a good designer, listen to all of that and create something that really is unique in the marketplace and actually has a chance and is personal and awesome. So that's kind of the answer. I mean, it's the very beginning of the whole process of building a brand. But if you can go through those steps and learn all about the client and figure out all those different parts of the brand, you won't have that, web design goes to hell experience, because you will know everything about this client. And when you come back to them and you say, here's your logo and here's your web design and here are your colors, they're gonna be like, oh my God, you perfectly understood me. And I'm telling you, when I've gone through this process and I listen that hard to a client, they are just blown away. And they trust you now because they know that you know just as much about them as they do. And I also say to them, like, this is your baby, this brand is your baby, and I'm gonna take care of your baby. And I said that to someone the other day, and they were like, oh my God, well, you're like the mommy, and I hope that you can get that baby out really well and take care of it and love it. And I'm like, okay, this is weird, but yes, we'll do this together. And so that is the way to make a brand that really makes that client happy and actually has a chance of being a real, honest, awesome brand in the marketplace. So thank you very much for that.